Hey everyone, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Welcome to class 2 of spring 2023, audio Midi 1. Everybody enjoy the assignment. It was pretty easy, fun assignment. I like to start off the semester that way. It's not low pressure while everybody's getting their technology together and just getting used to getting in back into school after the winter recess. I think it's a good starter. So, but today we're going to start getting much more into you know, MIDI, Pro Tools. Now, as I've said before, I teach this class with Pro Tools, but a lot of the techniques are applicable to whatever DAW you decide to use in the future. So, in other words, every DAW has MIDI note editing functionality, just like Pro Tools does. They've got the piano roll editor, they've got MIDI velocity, duration, they've got quantize, they've got transpose, they've got all these other functionalities. It's just a matter of learning your way around the GUI. But basically, they all do very similar things now. Yeah, I do think though that I don't think that Pro Tools is like the industry standard anymore. It's the industry standard in, let's say, in film and television mixing, and most albums are mixed in Pro Tools. But a lot of people write music in Logic. A lot of people write it in Cubase, in Reaper, in Ableton, and all these other DAWs. But it's still a good thing if you're going to work professionally to know Pro Tools. I think that that's the best way that I could say that. Give me 1 second. I want to adjust something here. Okay, great. You could still hear me? Okay, fine. All right, because I've noticed on the review video, the voice is getting a little crunchy, and I'm using a different microphone than I normally do, and I like this because I could turn my head and you'll still hear me, as opposed to when I had the stand-up mic. If I did something over here, my voice would change volume. And I also typically what I do with the class is typically I've been starting off with these classes by doing a presentation of some sort, which might be the history of sequencing, or it might be talking about how sequencers developed, or might be talking a little bit about electronic music and some of the parameters, or I might talk about somebody who's important person. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch that around so that will be at the end of the class, and we'll work on the class work at the beginning of the class. I think that that's what I want to do, because I've been finding that I get so involved in talking about the history because I love it so much that I don't often leave enough time to go over the stuff that we need to learn for the class, and that sort of gets rushed. All right, so let's start at the beginning again. I'm going to review some of the stuff that we went over last week. Those of you that had Recording Studio Fundamentals last semester with Professor Segerson, some of this will be review for you as well, but it will be through my perspective. And there you have it. So let's go to the big screen. Now, what I want to talk to you about right now is, before we get started, and let me get this right out here, right in the middle, and let's zoom in on this. So this is from something I did 12 years ago, and I just had it handy, and it will show my point. So this is a folder, and inside this folder, you'll find a bunch of other assets, right? And you'll see right here, you've got all of your Pro Tools files. The way that Pro Tools works in terms of folder hierarchy and structure, and this is very, very important for you guys to get this into your heads, to wrap your head around this, is that this right here is called the Pro Tools Session folder. The Pro Tools Session folder. And inside of this folder is like a big container. And inside that container are all the assets that Pro Tools needs to run your particular session, your particular project. So let's take a look at this. So I'm going to open this up, and you'll see that there are, right, different Pro Tools session files. This is the original one. And then you could see I've got a couple of others that are I've kept a diary. I've got 4 different versions of this. But there is also something here called the Wave Cache. Now, I'm going to show you how Pro Tools makes this every time it boots up. So if you don't have this in here, it's not a big deal. Pro Tools makes a new one. It's not a big deal. There's some session file backups, which I don't really use that often anymore, because when I've got big sessions that uses a software called Contact for my sample libraries, doing the auto session backup can cause Pro Tools to crash. But this is the big stuff right here. This one right here, the audio files, right? You see that I've got this poorly named because there's some audio, I don't know what that is, but then there are some audio tracks that have the names, audio files that have the names of the instruments that I was playing. And I'm using the older AIF format. Obviously, this is 12 years old. Now, I'm going to open this up, right? And what you'll see is a Pro Tools session will open up. Let me zoom back out. And what you'll see here is I have a combination of different tracks. And these tracks up here, these are all audio tracks. These are guitars. That's an acoustic guitar. Electric guitar. Here's another acoustic guitar. And then here's an organ right here. Okay, so the way that you could tell that these are audio tracks is that they've got these things in here, which are waveforms. Now, we're going to go over this in more detail in the second half of the semester when we start working with audio. But just take a look at this. You'll see these shapes. These are called audio waveforms. Just trust me. And the other thing is that if you look at this track here, it's different than this track here. Okay, let me zoom in on that. Oops, sorry, I apologize. Let me zoom in on those so you could take a closer look. So this purple track looks different than this blue track. Anybody want to venture a guess as to what the difference is? Purple.
Volume, loudness.
Yes, that's one. Yes, that's true. This, if you know anything about waveforms, this from the bottom to the top, when that is bigger, that means there's more amplitude or more volume, and this has less of that. So that's one aspect.
The blue track
is that George?
The blue one's stereo.
That was Georgie, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see you when I'm zoomed in like this. Yes, that's correct. You'll see that this track has one lane. This track has 2 lanes, right? The top one and the bottom, and they're not exactly mirrored because there's different information on each side. But yes, this is a stereo track, and additionally, you'll be able to look right over here. You can see that on the output, there is a left and a right for the stereo track, and there's only one output in the panning area for the mono track. And we're going to go over audio in great detail, in much more detail, like I said, but I had this open and I wanted to show you. And then you notice these are MIDI tracks here, right? And all of these things, this, all these things, the information that's inside of a track like this, these are called clips. These are MIDI clips, and these are audio clips. But you could just use the rubric clips, CLIPS. Okay, so now you see that I open this up and everything plays here. So all right, everything is playing. You're hearing audio tracks, you're hearing MIDI tracks. The MIDI tracks are basically playing the bass and the drums. and congas. Okay, now let me close this session and let me show you a keyboard shortcut for closing a session and not quitting Pro Tools. So it's Command, Shift, and W, right? So I'm going to go back here, and then you'll see that keyboard command down in this corner here. Command, Shift, and the letter W there, just like that. Command, Shift, W, and then you get the close dialog. So I'm not going to save that because I want to just leave it the way it was. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, right, and I'm going to drag this out of the session folder. And I'm going to try to open this up again. Let me just drag that into that folder. It should probably not find it now. Okay, let me open this up again. Now, you're going to, I have a missing files message. 209 audio files are missing. So now you'll see that on these audio tracks here, there's no waveforms. And when I play it back, you're not hearing any of the guitars. So what's happened here, and I'm going to close this and not save it, is that this session file is looking for the assets that are the audio assets that are in this folder. So let's say you finish a project and you compress this and send this to me, and I open this on my computer. My computer doesn't have your audio files, so it won't be able to open the project properly. So that is why it is very important when you are sending me your assignments. And it's not it's important for you to get in the good habit of doing that. It's important to get in the habit of doing this correctly at the beginning. So when you're going to send me an assignment, you're going to highlight this and right click on this, or in Windows, I guess it's control click. Is that correct? And then you're going to compress this, right? And it's going to compress the entire bit with all of the assets inside, and then that's what you're going to upload. So you have to compress the session folder. Okay, so this is what you would upload to our class folder. So session folder and session file. This is the session folder, and these are the session files. The ones with the little Pro Tools icon, they're going to say .ptx at the end. .ptf is an older version of Pro Tools, but our version that we're using now is .ptx. That's the extension at the end of that name. All right, so now I'm going to launch a new session here, Command-Shift-N, and I'm just going to call this Class 2. And I'm going to save this to, I've got my Class 2 right here. Let's take a look at that folder, the session folder. So Class 2 is right here. Okay, and notice that Pro Tools has made all of these additional folders. What it's doing is it's preparing the storage places for assets that you create while you're working. But there's nothing in these folders, right? They're empty. They're empty vessels waiting to be filled. It's like an empty glass before you put water into it. So there's none of those things in there. But when I watch what happens when I, okay, great. So we could see both folders here, both assets here. So this is the session folder, right? And this is the session. So I'm going to close this session and watch what happens to all of the data that's in this folder here. So boom, it all disappears because Pro Tools didn't have anything in it. So Pro Tools automatically gets rid of it. So technically for this kind of an assignment, you can send me, if it was just Midi, you can send me this, but I would prefer that you get in the habit of zipping up the session folder so that you don't make that mistake once we start using audio files. Every class, it takes people a while to get this. All right. So I'm going to go over it more and more. So let me open this folder up again and let me zoom in on this. And let me double click on this. One more time. Let me do one thing. I want you to watch something here. Okay, let me just close this. Okay, so now I'm going to open this up again, and now I've moved the edit window here. You'll see that it starts populating this folder with the other. See how it adds those other folders right in. Now notice the window position is remembered when you close out. The next time you open it up, it will open up where you've positioned it on your window. So for example, notice how this is all the way over on the left. If I drag this out so that it fills up my screen, and then I close out on Pro Tools, and I save that, when I open up Pro Tools this time, it will take up the entire screen. See that? Now, remember I showed you last week how to set up your preferences to add a click track for every new session. You'll notice on this one, there's no click track. So this is a bad thing about Pro Tools is it always remembers the preferences from the last session you had open. So you'll have to go back to your preferences and go back to Midi and automatically create click track. And then I need to fix these things here. And then now, if I need to add a click track, you just go to the track menu, and it's the very bottom one. You go all the way down to the bottom, boom, and it creates your click track. Now, let's take a look at the click track for a second, all right? Because you can optimize this to be a little bit more agreeable to you. I forget which one the Pro Tools defaults to. Okay, great. So I'm going to play this and you're going to hear a sound. Right? I hate that sound. You can change that. And then you can go right here and you can switch, you can select anything that you want, right? What I like myself is either the MPC click or the Uri click. The Uri click is the old school studio sound that I would have heard in the 1980s or 90s if I was doing a recording session, which I was during that time period. What happened? Oh, Daniel, what happened in Recording Studio Fundamentals a few times? Oh, handing in the session file instead of the session folder? Yeah, that'll happen. That happens. That doesn't happen to me, but you know, it did. it definitely did. Okay, so right, you can change the sound of the click, MPC, and then you want to change the sound of both of these. That's not a bad one either. There's also a hollow pluck. Nah, I don't like that. I like either the MPC, which is from the drum machine, or the Uri. Now, why I have picked two is that you have right here a volume slider. So you could turn up the volume on the downbeat with this top one. You see that? I'll really exaggerate it. So that's nice. You can always tell where the downbeat is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And so this is volume for the unaccented, and this is the volume for your downbeat or your offbeat. And then you can also change Can you? Oh, you have to do that in the tempo. Okay, that's fine. So, right. So if you turn off follow meter, you can, now I can have, I've got an eighth note click, See, now I'm accenting on 1 and 3. And then I've got eighth notes here. Now, what you can also do is the opposite, I think. Let me just make sure. Yeah. So this one, the unaccented one, the one on the offbeats can't be a larger rhythm value than the downbeat. But you can do all sorts of stuff that will help your performance, right? But I find having a nice accent Why is it not doing it anymore? Oh, follow meter, sorry. Right. That's a little exaggerated, but that's pretty nice. So you could play around with that if you want. Okay. So now your keyboards are should be all what's called class compliant, meaning that when you plug them in USB, they should automatically be recognized by Pro Tools. But you have to do it before you turn Pro Tools on, before you boot up. Okay? And actually, it's probably a good habit to have your USB peripherals plugged in before you turn your computer on. That's probably a good habit to get into. All right, especially with audio interfaces. To instantiate a new track, right? There are a bunch of different kinds of tracks that you can access in Pro Tools. We're in our class, for the beginning part of our class, we're only going to access one kind of track, and that is a stereo instrument track. Now, those of you that are taking a digital recording and composition 2, next week's assignment, the session folder needs to be zipped up and uploaded. Okay? That's one reason why I spent a lot of time on it here today, is because it'll benefit you all for next week's, for the upcoming assignment. So to instantiate a new track, you go Command, Shift, and the letter N. Command, Shift, N, like Nancy, and that gets you a new track dialog. And if we look here, right, we can create one. That's the number of tracks. You can add multiple tracks if you'd like. New. And when you click here, remember I said last week that in Pro Tools, any place where you see a triangle means that there's a hidden menu or sub menu. So don't worry about all. You might not even have these in your version of Pro Tools, because I have Pro Tools Ultimate because of the film work I do. But you basically, mono and stereo are your two choices, and we'll be dealing with mono audio tracks, but we're going to get a stereo, and then right here, these are the kinds of tracks. In our class, we might get into a basic folder, but we're going to be dealing with audio track, aux input, master fader, and VCA, audio track, and instrument track. So just for right now, though, you can go down to instrument track. Don't worry about this. I'm going to explain this next week. And name. So I'm going to name this piano, right? And then I'm going to hit create. Now, wherever you see a blue box like this, if you hit the enter key on your computer, not clicking on it, you can click on it and it'll work, but get used to using the computer keyboard. So if I hit the enter key, it won't create a new track. Why are you embarrassing me, Pro Tools? Why you do that? There we go. All right. Now, we went over this a bit last week. There's one more column that I want you to show, right? And we're going to go right here and we're going to click on the instrument track. So you're going to show that, and it's going to let you see what the name of the instrument is right here. And you probably won't need to see the IO, so I'm just going to leave that off. Now, and you won't need the sends column for right now. So this is all you'll need for right now. Instrument and inserts. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to name this. I'm going to call this piano. Okay. And always name your tracks before you start recording something. And I'll show you why in a minute. This is your insert column. And what this does is it inserts something into the audio path so that whatever data is in the track, whatever kind of clip, goes through that insert, and that insert affects the sound. So on an instrument track, there are going to be MIDI notes in here on these clips, and those MIDI notes are going to trigger the instrument that you plug in to this insert. It's called plugging it in, and that comes from patch bays. And I'm going to do a lesson on patch bays this semester. You're going to get that, and I'm going to show you where they came from historically and all that and how they were used. But just, it's called plugging this, a plugin. So I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to go to Air Music Technology, and I'm going to put in Mini Grand. All right. Let me zoom back out a little bit. And I went over this a little bit last week. This is the GUI, that's graphical user interface, for this piano track. And if we look here, there's a bunch of controls on this piano track. This is the model, and they give you a bunch of different, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different models of piano. And we'll go over that in a second. This is your dynamic response, which you may play around with. This is your tuning, whether it's equal or stretched. We're not going to worry about that. Just leave it at equal. And then this is the kind of effect that is on the sound, the kind of room that it's placed in. And it has a chamber. A chamber is not like a chamber ensemble, but it's a separate room in a recording studio that's usually made up of tiled walls that has a microphone in it and a speaker. And people typically send a copy of the audio into that chamber, and they record the sound that's in there. So it's like if you're in a tiled bathroom and you hear like a very quick slap kind of reverb on your voice, just imagine if that was like 400 square feet instead of 15 square feet. Hall, which is like LeFrak Hall, a concert hall. Ambient, which is just big and luscious. And then soft and bright, I guess those are the kinds of the timbre of the reverb. And studio would be a small room. So they've got it set for a chamber now. And then the mix right here is how much of that reverb. And this is your output level. So we're not going to touch this right now. Now, you notice that I've got this in here, and you can hear me tapping away on the keyboard, and there's nothing happening. That's because you need to record enable the track, which is this left little button here. And you click on that, and you see that it starts blinking red. Now, if I play, you get a sound, right? So I'm just... It's a beautiful thing. Okay, so let's go through some of these different presets here. So if I go up to reel and play something, this is for student work. This is a good piano. It's not great, but it's good. Okay, so now if I go to bright, so this would be like if you're playing something like that, or you might use that. Hard would be even more. right? Even you want something to punch through a mix. And then dance, you always hear like a piano on a dance track. That's also very punchy, atmospheric. You see that the timbre changes. It's very... And then soft and ballad. You can play around with these on your own. And let's play around with the sound here, the reverb. So this is the chamber, and I'll keep that ballad piano. I'll just hit some notes and I'll turn up the mix. Right? I'll go to hall. And you can almost hear that there's a little delay before the reverb comes in. That's supposed to simulate the amount of time it takes for the sound to get from the piano, which is the source, to the reflective surfaces. I don't think that's very convincing. There's better ways to do reverb, which we'll go over. Ambient. And then you could just play around with some of these. I would just say, chamber is fine for now. Okay. Now, also, additionally, if you look up in this area here, right, you see that there's the word preset. And then over to the right, you see a circle with our friend, the downward facing triangle, which means if I click on this, you'll be able to save something. So if you've created a particular sound, you'll be able to save that. I will go over that in the future. But then below that, there's another rectangle with a triangle. And when you click on that, another menu comes up and you get all of these factory presets. And you can definitely play around with these. So if I do concert hall back row, what does that sound like? That's okay. Real piano. Not bad. Okay, so that's like a really quick thing with that. Now I'm going to delete this and I'm going to go back to a new track. So I'm going to Command Shift and the letter N like Nancy. And then I'm going to go one stereo. And then if you look here, you'll see something that says track presets. Let me zoom in on that a little bit more. Click, and at the bottom, track presets, Avid, Air Instrument Bundles, and Mini Grand. Right? So what you can do then is you can also say, it has some of the presets in there. So if I put ballad piano, and then I'll create that. What's nice about that is that it names the track for you. So that's pretty cool. So let me do that again. Let me delete this. Now, let me show you how I'm deleting a track. I'm going to right click, or I can command click, or control click, I'm sorry, and scroll down and it says delete, right? Boom. And that gets rid of that. So Command Shift N, stereo. Let me zoom in on this for you. Track preset, Avid, Air Instrument Bundle, and Mini Grand. And then I'll just use Mini Grand default, which is fine. And then it just says Mini Grand. You can rename that. Now to rename that, what you'll do is you'll double click on the header here and you'll just write piano if you want, right? Okay. Any questions on that so far? When do we make music? Never. We spend 15 weeks just working on setting things up. No, I'm only kidding. But I will tell you this, though, and this is a very important thing to remember, and I'm going to go over this when I start talking about the assignment, which will be in about 10 minutes or so. Preparation is the key to success, right? When somebody's successful, yeah, you get some people that have a lucky break, but a lot of times success is opportunity meeting preparation. So, for example, if some of you are jazz majors, the graduate students, and if you get called on a gig and you go to the gig and the leader calls out Bessie's Blues by Coltrane and it's in the key of E flat and you don't know how to play an E flat blues because you've only practiced C, F, and B flat, you're not prepared. So you're not going to be successful. You had the opportunity, right? But you didn't have the preparation. But if you could play blues in all 12 keys, you have no worry. The leader's going to call out a blues in D flat, and you'll be like, sure, I'm rocking. You know? He's going to call out a blues in D flat, in G flat, in D, in G, in B flat, in B. Right? Preparation makes success. When I was an undergraduate, I had my main guru at Queens College was a guy named Sal Berkowitz, and he retired about 20 years ago, and he passed away not that long after he retired. He taught for like 45 years. He started teaching in the 1950s, and he took a little break in the 60s because he was working orchestrating on Broadway and on television in New York City. And then in the late 60s, he came back and he taught until he retired, which was like maybe early 2000s. And he used to make us transpose stuff. I had him for theory for 5 semesters. And every week we had to come in, even the non-pianists, which I felt bad for them. He made them transpose stuff like the exposition to a Bach invention to a different key every week, not for a non-pianist, right? So, but that was really good training. And so I was in the Broadway show, Miss Saigon, and I got hired for that at the end of 1990. And the show ran from April 11th, 1991 until the end of January of 2021. But our first cast rehearsal date was January 28th of 1991. And I was playing the rehearsals as well as being the principal keyboard player for the entire run. And after about a week, we had two rehearsal pianists, myself and another woman. And then we had the associate conductor who also played a piano at the rehearsals and also conducted some stuff. And then we had the conductor of the show. And so we're working, and there was a song in the key of A minor that wasn't working for the singer. And so they asked us to transpose it to A flat minor on the spot. And the other 2 pianists didn't want to handle it. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. So I'm sight reading this thing, and I'm not playing exactly what's written, right? But I'm playing through this because I'd only played it like once or twice before. And, I can look at the groups of notes and I know what chords they are. And so, if I don't get it exactly right, I get the harmonies right and the song moves on. And so, preparation leads to success, right? So that's just a little aside that I'll just, I throw those things in occasionally. So, all right. So let's go back to our lesson here. Now, what I want you guys to do is to use something called count off. And there's also this thing called wait for note, which I'm going to try. I used to use that when I first started teaching. And then one thing that Avid does is they add new features to updates to Pro Tools. And then while they do that, bugs show up. And then it takes a long time for them to fix the bugs. So this was great. Wait for note MIDI. I love that. But then it got buggy. So then I started using count off. So that's up here in this area here. And if you turn this on by clicking on it, it becomes that lime green and then it's off. And then you could set up how many bars, right? So let me do that again. So I double clicked here and the options come up, and right here, count off. You want to make sure that the count off only happens when you're recording, not when you're playing back. You don't want to wait 2 bars for your music to play back when you're listening to what you've done. So you could set this up to be 1 bar, 2 bars, whoops, as many bars as you want. I'm going to do 2 bars because I want to show you guys something, all right? And the click is only going to play during record. I went over that last week. Don't worry about this area here. This is for triggering an external click. We don't need that. We have a click track built inside. Don't worry about that at all. So this area here you ignore. But during record and only during 2 bars. So let me take a screenshot of that. And I'll pop that in the chat in a minute. Okay. So I hit the return key. I'm back at measure 1 because I was at measure 4 before. And I've got this record enabled. Now, I went over this a little bit last week. If you have like an iMac or any kind of a computer that has an extended keyboard, the number 3 will activate recording. But if you don't, Command and Spacebar. And this is why we got rid of Spotlight. Remember last week we turned Spotlight off in the preferences? I don't know if I've never used Spotlight for anything. But Spotlight uses that same key command for something and it will override Pro Tools. Okay, so you hit Command and Spacebar. So I'm going to hit Command and Spacebar. And you see now it starts recording after 8 beats. Now, if I wanted to get rid of that, I could use Command Z to undo that. That's the same on every Mac program, right? And you would just have to look in the edit to see what that is, what the key command is for Windows. I know at least one of you is using a Windows computer. Okay, and that's another reason why we use Pro Tools and not some of the other software like Logic. Because Logic is only for Apple, and we can't. Some students don't have an Apple computer, which is, Windows computers are perfectly great. It's just that I never got used to using one. Okay, now that tempo was a little brisk for me, right? I want to do a slower tempo. So how do you change the tempo? So I'm going to hit the return key. I'm back at measure 1, and I'm going to let me zoom in on this so you can see this. And in our ruler, you see that we've got a tempo line, or a lane, I think they're called that, a tempo lane. And you see right here, there's a number. It says 120. And if we look over here, you could see that our tempo is 120. So if I double click on that little red triangle right there, the sideways facing triangle, whoops, or never mind, let's just do this. Click on this plus sign. Right here, there's a little plus sign. Click on that. It opens up the tempo change window. So I'm going to do 60 beats a minute. That's much slower. And you'll notice that right here, it tells you what the tempo is. Now remember, you have to have the conductor track engaged. So for this assignment, you're going to have the conductor track on and you're going to have the metronome on. And you're going to use count off. I'm going to go overweight for note to see if that works. So you know how to do that too, but count off definitely works. So now if I do command and space bar, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, it starts recording. Okay. Now, for me personally, 2 bars is a long time, but I'm going to leave it here because I want to show you something. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to just start playing some simple scales on the piano, right? I'm not worried about the content I'm creating right now. I want to show you just how it works. So I'm going to do command spacebar, and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. And I'm just playing quarter notes. Two, 3, 4, off. Okay, so now you see that this track has been populated by a MIDI clip. Excuse me 1 second. That's another MIDI trick, which I could next semester I teach that. I've got this little thing here set up so that when I push this button, it's kind of cool. Yeah, fun and games. Okay, so it's populated this with this, and you could see that these notes take the shape of what I played, right? It's like notation, except it's like a piano roll. If you've ever seen old player pianos, right? The wooden, the piece of paper that goes through, it's almost like a music box, and it triggers the piano to play on those mechanical player pianos from the early 1900s and late 1800s. And so that's cool. But let me show you something. What I want you to get in the habit of doing when you play is during the count off, I want you to learn how to focus in on the click track. And what you want to do is you want to feel what's called this. And I know that there are music majors in here, but there are some of you that aren't music majors. So I'm going to be very literal. All right. So what you want to do is focus in on the subdivisions of the beat. So that's if the beat is 1, 2, 3, 4, you want to feel 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You want to feel those are called eighth notes. So you want to feel the eighth note subdivision. And why is that? Because you want to get it's much easier if you're playing something very slow like this. Well, how long is that wait, right? To get that weight accurate and to have your playing be accurate, because it's much, I'm going to teach you how to edit right to the grid at the beginning just to learn the techniques of the tools and the techniques and everything. But when you're eventually going to be doing your own music, it's much better to capture a good performance. And when you're playing to a click track like this, you want to feel the subdivisions. It helps you even when you're playing longer notes. So what I mean by that is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and off. And where you go off, the duration of the notes is also very important. So it's you feel you use the metronome. It's not just this like click. You have to feel what's between the click. And I remember many recording sessions where we were all trying to play along with the click. And what you do is you focus in on the drummer, what the drummer's playing. What the drummer does typically on the hi-hat in popular music styles or on the ride cymbal in jazz is they play the subdivisions of the beat, whether it's 16th note, chicka 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 chicka, or jazz dan 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 dan, right? you feel that and you play along with that's your reference along with the click track, right? So when you're doing this work, you are a self-contained entity that's doing you're training your body to feel the subdivisions without there being a drummer there. Now, there is a school that puts up a drum performance and plays along with that, and that's really great for copping a feel. But right now we're at the beginning, and I'm teaching you the basics for this stuff. And this is one reason why I don't teach out of a textbook, because a textbook won't tell you that. I'm teaching you what I do, and I've been doing this one way or another since the 1980s. So, yeah. Okay. Now, that's great. Now, what if I wanted to add something else after that, right? Well, I use my selector tool right here. And you can access the selector tool by holding the command key down and pressing the number 3. Command 3. Now, if you look, let me zoom in. Right, I can scroll through these with holding the command key down. 1, 2, 3. Notice that the cursor's not moving. 4, 5, and 6. Right, so that's a quick way to navigate. Whoops. So command 3 gets you to the selector tool. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to put that right at measure 6. And you notice that my counter is now at measure 6, right? So I'm just going to click there. And then I'm going to do my 2 bars. Whoops, I got to record and enable my track. All right, and then 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Okay, so I didn't start on the downbeat. I started after the downbeat. And so now if I wanted to play something, what if I wanted to do something in the middle of bar 8, right? What you have to then do is you have to go up here to your grid value and change that. So I'm going to change it to quarter note, right? And then I'm going to start something on beat 3 of bar 8. So I've clicked there and you'll notice it says bar 8, beat 3, right, in your counter. And then 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and... Okay, so what happened was that it played the 2, this is why I like 1 bar count off. It played the 2 bars and then it played beats 1 and 2 and punched you in on beat 3. It gave you 8 beats up front, but you're coming in on beat 3. It gave you one in the first 2 beats of that measure. So let me go and change this now so that it's not so obnoxious. So I'm going to make this 1 bar. Okay, and then now what will happen is, let me delete this. So notice I'm click and drag, right? And then I can hit delete and it'll go away. So I'm going to put this back here. Okay. And now when I hit the record, I'm going to get 4 beats plus 2 beats. So it'll give me my 4 beats count off and then beat 1, beat 2, and punch me in or start me recording at beat 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. What happened to my click track? Oh, I turned my click track off. One more time. Be careful with that. Make sure your click track is on. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So I wasn't really careful there, and you see my rhythm is a little sloppy, right? And let me show you what I mean by that. beat 3 is great, but this is where beat 1 of the next measure is. And you notice that there's that blinking line there. That's the downbeat, and I'm a little early. I'm going to show you how to fix stuff like that. Now, let me delete some of this stuff. And let me fit all that in. Okay, so we've got here, back to our original bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do Command-Shift-N, and I'm going to put a new stereo piano, right? Just going to go right to Mini Grand, and I'm going to use the default. And then I'm going to name this track Piano 2. All right. And what happens now? This is why you need a click track, because now the click track is our reference. And I'm going to play an additional part and make some harmony here. I'm just going to play something a third higher. All right. So it'll be 4 beats, and then we'll come right in. 2, 3, and 4, and. Oh, whoops. See? Now, what I did there, I made a mistake, and you see that it erased some of what I had played before. I can fix that by doing Command-Z. Remember, you need to record enable the second track. And with MIDI, this doesn't work with audio, and we'll go over this, not this semester, but next semester. We might go over it this semester. But if I record enable this track, and I want to record enable this track, I can just click on this, and then this will be deactivated. There is a way where you can record on multiple MIDI tracks at once. I'm not going to get into that today. That's a little advanced. I do that sometimes when I want to layer sounds really quickly. It's not that difficult to set up, but let's just stick with the small bit. So now let me do that again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, you notice I made some mistakes, right? I was off timing, right? That's because I was not feeling the eighth notes, but that's fine. We can fix that, and I'll show you that right now. Let me move this guy over here. Whoops. Okay. Now, you'll notice here on the bottom left-hand side, you're going to see a horizontal line and an upward-facing arrow. You have a vertical line and a sideways-facing arrow, but this is the one that we want right here. All right, I'm going to click on that, and that's going to open up our MIDI editor. Okay. And notice what I did right there? It opened up like this. I hovered right here, and the cursor changed to a cross. I clicked, and I can drag up like that. Now, the next thing to notice is that this is the toolbar for the MIDI editor, and it's got a golden or yellow highlight there. That means that this is the active part of Pro Tools. You can see both the MIDI, the edit window, and the MIDI editor, but this is the part that's active. If I click here, up in this area here, you're going to see a golden highlight around the toolbar up here. So watch. Let me get this set up so it's a little easier to see everything. There, I'm going to click, and you see now there's one around here. That only works when you've got the MIDI editor open. All right. So now if I click down here, this one is active. Now you'll notice over here on the left, this is your tracks list. And it will show, if it will let you select which track you see in the MIDI editor. And you could see multiple tracks in the MIDI editor, but we're not going to do that right now. I sometimes have 5 or 6 tracks open. I can edit them because they're all color coded. It's easy to see. So if I click right here, we see that we've got track 2 piano and track 3, which is piano 2. So if I, let's get a little far to the side. Let me get this more in the center so it's easier for you to see. There we go, that's better. So this column here lets you know which track is in here. This column here lets you know the color of the track, and I'll get into color coding shortly, or maybe next week we'll get into that. This here tells you the type of track, and when you see a little square with a little piano keyboard in there, that lets you know it's an instrument track, right? This click track is an AUX input, it's called, and it's just a little downward facing arrow. We'll get into that later. And then this is the name of the track, and you notice there's a little pencil here, which lets you know that that's the track that's active to be edited. Now, this is the Midi editor, and you notice that there's a lot more grids here. That's because I've got the resolution set to 240, what are called ticks. And I'm going to go over ticks next semester. I've got next class. I've got a whole presentation for that. But all you need to know for the assignment that I'm going to charge you with for next week is that you should be set for an eighth note or 480 ticks. All right. So this is the piano keyboard, and you'll notice here that there are numbers at every C. This is called C8, C7. It's the different octaves, C6. Now, you're not seeing any notes here because it's at a lower octave. So I can just I've got the selector here. It's hovering in this field. And if I scroll with the mouse, it will scroll up and down. So let me show you what I'm doing. I'm just scrolling with the mouse. Here you guys have trackpads, right? So, let me just show you. If you can, 2 fingers on the trackpad and you'll be able to scroll. So let me go back. So I'm scrolling, 2 fingers on the trackpad. Now, last week I asked you to enable key focus right here. When I'm in the Midi editor, it switches so that it's here. So in other words, the keyboard focus is now active here. When I click here, you'll see that it gets active up here. See, it turns on, and boom, it turns on here. So that means that we can use the R key and the T key. And I don't mean like a tiki bar, but the letter T key to zoom in and out. So if I do T, it zooms way in, and you'll notice at the bottom here, you can go left to right with this bar here on the bottom just by clicking and dragging. Okay, and let me get this all. So if I do T, you'll see that it zooms way in and R zooms way out. Great. And then again, you can scroll left and right by using the mouse or 2 fingers on the trackpad, left and right, and then up and down. All right, so it's very quick to navigate back and forth. And just to get those techniques, those finger techniques in your right or left hand, it will really help you to be like a ninja, where you're moving around really quickly and you're not thinking about it and you're just doing it. And that's the thing about working in this discipline, is that the better you know how to navigate through the software, the more like a flow everything becomes. And you all know that when you're in a flow, when you're playing your instrument, everything is much better. If you're thinking too much while you're doing something, you're not doing it, you're thinking. You're behind the time. Your body's doing something, you're thinking about something else. So knowing this stuff well enough to not have to think about it, and that just takes practice. And that's why, when you do the assignment this week, I'm going to want you to break up the 2 hours that I think it will take you to do into 4 sessions or 3 sessions of 40 minutes or 30 minutes each. And this way you'll be working on this multiple days, and that's better for reinforcing everything. And it also gives you a chance to go over your work and correct it. I want to do some editing to piano 2, right? So I'm going to click over here on piano 2 and make that active. And then I have to also deactivate piano 1. So I'm just making sure. So in other words, with this, if I click here, you'll see that there are now 2 notes here. You only want to, right at the beginning, you only want to see 1 note. All right. And this is a technical exercise that we're going to be doing on the assignment so that you learn how to use the tools. And there are automated ways to do all of these processes I'm going to show you, but you need to know the manual way to do it, because there might be times when you only want to edit a couple of notes or 1 note, and you need to have that technical facility, right? In a couple of weeks, I'll show you the automated way for doing all this stuff. But right now, for the first assignment, we're going to do everything manually, 1 note at a time. I find it to be good practice. Okay, so I wanted to play just quarter notes, and we could see here with my notes here that I've got my grid set to an 8th note, but some of the notes are too long and some of the notes start a little early. So what I want to do is I want to pick the trim tool, which is this guy here. And to get to that, it's command and the number. Oops, sorry. It's command and the number 2. And it's this 2 up here. So command and 2. And just, I just hold my thumb down, and don't keep your hands tight. Keep your hands loose, right? You don't want to get carpal tunnel syndrome. And you could just, rotate here and touch these numbers very simply. Just keep your hand nice and relaxed. I don't want anybody getting repetitive stress injuries. Okay. Let's go back and let me zoom in on this for you. So I've got my trim tool, and if I just hover, right, you'll see that the trim changes direction depending upon what I'm hovering over. So I'm hovering over, and you'll notice also right here, the color of this note will change. So in other words, you see how I'm over this C here, right? And that C is gray. As I go up, and then boom, it changes into the trim tool. And then if I go here and I just click, it will snap it to the grid. If I go here and click, it will just snap it to the grid. If I go here and click, and then this one's early, you notice I flipped, boom, 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 boom. Now you can also click and drag if you want to make something longer or shorter. And that works with both sides. And that will become important when we are phrasing things, right? So you can just go through these very quickly. And now that's quote unquote rhythmically perfect, which you don't want, but we are learning skills right now. So now if I play that back, and then you can close this track, this MIDI editor right here by clicking with this horizontal line and downward facing arrow. And this should be much better. Hit the return key. A couple of these notes are not right, but you get the idea. Okay, so this is going to be the bulk of what you're going to be doing for the next week. Is you're going to be working on 2 piano tracks. Okay? And what I've got here is, and this is up, let me do this one thing first. I've got this screenshot, which I'm going to pop into the chat. Great. Okay, so this is the assignment, and this is going to be a multi-week assignment. This could take 3 to 4 weeks to finish this assignment completely, depending upon how fast everybody works. So the next week, part 1 is going to be due. You're going to take an assigned, well, it's not a piano piece, but an assigned piece by Bartók, and render each hand onto a separate piano track. Graduate students, you're going to do the Bartók violin duet, and advanced music majors like Peter Minetti, I know is a senior. I think you'd enjoy that challenge. undergraduate music major, you can use something called the Bartók Brawl, which is a piano piece. And advanced MAP minors can also choose this. MAP minors, you could choose either Bartók 10, 17, or 18. I'll show you all of these. If you have trouble reading music, Bartók 18 has the notes and timing notated on the PDF. So I'll show you that. And then what you're going to do is have all the note lengths edited for accuracy and note velocities edited for dynamics. We haven't done the velocities yet. Maybe what I'll do for next week is just note lengths for accuracy, and then for the following week, we'll add the velocities edited for dynamics. And this is how I'd like you to, an example of how I'd like you to title it. And you will zip up the session folder and upload that, and I've got the link right there. Whoops. Right into this one. And then here's your upload right here. Okay. So let's take a look at the different musics. And I'm going to use the one for the MAP students. Okay. So this is, if you can't read music that well, this is very simple. Right here. These are the names of the notes that I've got written. Each hand is playing the same line, 1 octave apart. And by 1 octave apart, what I mean is you play one line here or here and the other line here, depending upon what octave your keyboard is in. It could be here and here, depending upon what you're set up. So it's the same thing, just played in parallel. Okay. And then what I have here is what part of the beat everything comes in. So this is what the metronome, the counter, is going to have. So the first note is going to be 1 and 2, and then these come in 3, 4, etc., all the way through. Now, if you don't know the names of the notes, I've made a key for you. So we've got a piano notes map, right? So here we go. So when something, this will tell you the note. So if you see something that looks like this, you'll know that it's this blue one here. It's all color coded. And obviously you tell what note it is by the arrangement of 2 and 3 black notes. So I've set that all up to make it as, facile as possible for those of you. I have 3 levels of students in this class, maybe 4. So I have to, I did this stuff a couple of semesters ago. So it's just, it's fine. Okay. So now the brawl. So this is the one, if you can't read music really well. If you can read music on the keyboard, this one's interesting because it's in contrary motion. So that's kind of cool. Now for undergraduate music students, you're going to do this one. All right. Now, you're going to play the right hand. And then you're going to play the left hand. Now, you notice there's a big jumps in the left hand, right? Well, you don't have to play them like, you can go. Right? That's totally fine. It's not cheating. It's not cheating. There is no cheating with this stuff. It's just getting the music into the computer. So this is the brawl. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So you're going to put in the tempo, and the tempo is also on 17 and 18. He gives you the tempo right here. So that's 120. So you're not going to have to touch the tempo. That's what Pro Tools defaults at. If you do this one here, the tempo is at 96 for a quarter note. This one here also is in 3/4. I'll have to show you how to do that, which I will shortly. This one is in 2/4. I'll show you how to do that. Now, Bartók number 10. Yeah, don't worry about that. Okay, so this is the one for the graduate students and the more advanced. Now, you'll notice with this one, it's a violin duet, right? So I'm going to show you a couple of things with this because I'm going to work on this right now with you. Now, if you notice here, there are time signature changes. So it starts off in 3/4, then it goes to 2/4, then back to 3/4, right? Great. So let's work on that. And then this will help you all with your tempo, with your time signature changes. Now, this says that it's at 80 beats a minute. I'm going to show you guys a trick. So I'm going to click here. I'm at measure 1. And I'm going to set this at 80 beats a minute. Now, if this is too fast for you to play, you can preset a slower tempo that you can toggle back and forth between. Right? That helps people that aren't keyboard players. Unfortunately, the piano keyboard is still the main way to input notes into a sequencer. There are alternate controllers like the Ableton Push, and my keyboard has drum pads on it that you can use, but unfortunately, it's the piano keyboard. So, and every musician should know a little bit of piano anyway. That's where you learn about your harmony. Miles Davis used to rag on Cannonball Adderley because he didn't know harmony. And so anyway, knowing keyboards is good. So I'm going to make this so that I can see both bits. Now I have 2 monitors, right? So if you've got a laptop and like a pad, you could put this on the pad and you could see it on the pad, and then you could work on your laptop. Or you could print it out and then you could have it right there on your side, because seeing both of these things on the laptop is not so great. So to get that, preset that slower tempo, what you're going to do is you're going to turn off the conductor track and you're going to type in a slower tempo just by clicking there. And I'm going to type 60 beats per minute. That's 20 beats slower. You could make it as slow as you need to, so that when you're recording, it's going to record at 60 beats a minute. Then you turn the conductor track back on by clicking here and then play it back at the right tempo. That's not cheating. I know for a fact, I've been at recording sessions where famous musicians, like great jazz guitarists, they play in a tune at 168 and it's a little too fast. They recorded it at 144 and use something called elastic audio to play it back at 168. Big time famous musicians who are on studio musicians who are on hit records. Yeah. So if they can do it, we can do it. So remember what I said, preparation is the key, right? So what you first want to do is make sure your time signatures are set up and your tempos are set up and you've got your 2 instruments set up, okay? So the tempo is at 80 and I've got my preset slower tempo. And what I want to do is add my time signatures. So measure 1 is 3/4. So what do? Over here, you've got Meter. And Meters is not just a funky band from New Orleans doing the sissy strut. Okay, so if you click here, snap to bar, location is bar 1 is 3/4. And you notice that now you're in 3/4. And then I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So at measure 6, I want about bar of 2/4. So I'm just going to type 6 in the counter. And then I'm going to click my meter again. And I'm going to notice it says measure 6. I'm going to go 2/4. Then it goes back to 3/4 at measure 7. So I'm just going to type measure 7 in there. Click this again and go back to 3/4. Okay? Great. Now, save, right? You go through the whole thing and you set up the structure. Okay? Oh, my dog is woofing at something. Oh, well. Okay. So everybody understands I've seen a MIDI guitar, right? Well, MIDI guitars are fine, Georgie. They can work. Yes. All right. So I'm going to play now. I'm going to play the first bit. And you notice that the thing about this bit, which we're going to analyze this next week, is that there are 4 parts. The violin 1 has 2 parts, the top line, and then this line here. And music majors, whenever you have 2 notes, What do you notice about the bottom note on the violin? Can anybody answer that question? You think about that while I'm working on this. You can, right? You got D's and A's.
They're both half notes.
Yes, that's true. But when you're playing two notes at a time, one of these notes is different than the other. Think about the violin. Does anybody know what the violin is tuned to? What notes? Open strings. G, D, A, and E. So all of you that are music majors, you should know that the violin, viola, and cello is tuned in fifths. The cello is low C, G, D, and A. The viola is the same thing, an octave higher. And then the violin is G below middle C, D, E, A, and E. You should have that. And then a bass, upright bass, is tuned in fourths with the lower E, A, D, and G. It's like the bottom four strings of an of a guitar. So if you want to be a composer and a musician, these are things that you should have memorized. Okay, so here we've got D's and A's. Those are open strings on the violin. So whenever you got playing two notes at once on the violin, the bottom note is the open string. And then they're fingering on the fretboard, the fingerboard, the other note. All right, so I'm going to play just the top note. All right, and then I'll show you how to add the bottom note. So I'm going to hit return, go back to measure one. I'm going to have one measure of count off, and then I'm going to play this. Now notice there's eighth notes here, so you want to get that eighth note in your head. 1 and 2, 3, 4, and up. So I made a mistake. We're in 3/4. So it's a little quick. So I'm going to turn off the conductor track and go down to 60. So see, I'm making mistakes to show you that even, that this is good. I can now 1 and 2 and 3 and off. Okay, great. So now I've done measure 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? I want to add the second note here. Now, if you can play it in, yes, go ahead, play it in. Not a problem. I could definitely play that in. It's not a problem. But I want to teach you, you're not keyboard player, how do you get the information into the computer, right? You need to learn tricks. There are tools here to help you. So up here in our MIDI controls, you'll see this guy right here. That is called Midi merge, right? This guy right here. So I'm going to activate that. And what that will do is that will let me play a second part on this track without erasing the first part. Midi merge, this guy here. It's your friend. All right, so I just want to play this D on beat 2 and D on beat 1, 2 A's here on this measure. Yeah, and then another A, 3 A's on this measure and 1 here. So I'm going to just do that. 1 up. Let's go back here. Make Pro Tools active. Okay. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and off. Off. Great. Now, you can either go on and do piano 2, right? But one way that you could work is you could work in smaller chunks, right? So I've just recorded 4 bars. So I've got 4 bars of the first part done, right? I'm going to edit that. So let me open up my MIDI editor. And what I want to do is I want to make all these notes be exactly the length that they're written as an exercise. So, and later on when I'm orchestrating this, because you are going to orchestrate this from multiple instruments, we're going to use the two piano tracks as if they were something called a sketch score, which many composers work from. All right. So we're using music techniques from notation in this electronic medium. So we're going to think of these two tracks eventually, after we have everything recorded, as if they were a sketch score. So we may alter the length of the notes later on, but for right now, we're going to make them exactly the length that they need to be. So my first two notes are eighth notes. So they need to start right at the downbeat. So I'm just going to click and drag these, right? And you see, I'm going very quickly. Too long, starts too early. These are too early, too long. Make this right here. Now, make sure that when you've got a note repeating, right, make sure that the note ends before the next note starts. Otherwise, you're going to get a very unpleasant sound. Okay, right, there we go. So what I mean by that is this note here, right? If this note is now stopping right here, you want to make sure that it ends right there, and then this note starts right afterwards. So now this will sound mechanical. And let's play it back at the right tempo. Right? So that part's done. And then let me quickly do this next bit. And notice how I'm fixing the beginning of the notes before I do the length when there's overlap like this. That's the best way to go for this, I think, when you've got repeated notes. Like this right here. So I'm fixing the attack of that note and then dragging this out. So I can do this very quickly because I've been doing it for so long. So it just takes a little practice, and you too will be It takes a little practice, and you too will be rocking with the trim tool. Okay. Great. Okay, so now I'm going to add my left hand up to that same point, right? Let me close this for right now. Now I want to record enable this. I want to go back to the beginning. And let's see, let me go back to 60. So I'll turn off the conductor track. Okay, let's try it. So 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, so there's a lot of mistakes right there, right? I'm going to show you how to fix them. Just got to get the information in there, and then we use the tools to give you the performance you want. Now, it's better if you play it in really well, but you can still get a really good performance using the edit tools. All right, so let's go to our MIDI. I'm going to highlight the track right here by using the grabber tool and just clicking on it. And I'm going to open this up. And yeah, you see how it automatically selects piano 2. So let me edit. Let's get this over here and let me edit this. Now notice I started a little early, but it came in right on the downbeat, which is helpful. And I'm just going to clean up these ends. Now, with this note here, this is an eighth note with a rest. So you're going to make sure that there's the rest there. And I'm just going to click and drag these out. Now, I played a wrong pitch. I played an F natural when there was an F sharp, right? So where is the F sharp? The F sharp is right here. That's the one I played that's wrong. So notice how I clicked on the F sharp, the F here, and it highlighted it. I can also use the grabber tool and just click on it. I can also use the selector tool and just highlight it. And then what I'm going to do is, there's a couple of ways you can move the note. I'm going to just push the upward arrow, and it's going to move it up by half steps. So now that's correct. See, I can just keep going up and down. I could also use the grabber tool and just grab and slide up and down. All right, so that's how you would fix the pitch. So now I've so let's make that at the right tempo. So for next week, get through all of your pieces with just get the notes in both hands and get the note lengths edited. Okay. Now, I could do this in about 5 to 10 minutes, the whole thing. Just rock it in there and edit it. Maybe 15 minutes. But you guys, it should take you, just like I said, a couple of hours of work over the next week to get this in. What I would do if I were graduate students is, and people are going to do this piece, is get everything set up, make sure your tracks are named, make sure you've got the title is correct, make sure you've got your bar numbers set up, make sure that you've set up the tempo, and then the slower tempo by turning on and off the conductor track, and work in sections. So I just did 4 bars with the right hand, I edited it. Then I did 4 bars with the left hand and I edited that. You could go through the whole right hand 4 bars at a time and edit that until you finish. Yes. Well, there's no markers, Daniel, but it's the, for this one, we are going to do markers, but for changing the meter, yes. If you want, if you're an undergraduate and you feel like you can do this, by all means, this is a much nicer piece. The Brawl is pretty nice. The other ones are a little less so, but we'll make do. And then realize that this is going to be a process. We're going to be taking this piece and we're going to be orchestrating it from multiple instruments from here. And I can teach you all sorts of techniques like copy and paste, duplicate, all sorts of stuff. We're going to work on velocity to make shaping. We're going to use note length for phrasing and stuff like that. So we're doing step by step. Now, okay, any questions on that? Okay, so I don't know if any of you have ever heard of somebody named Robert Moog, M-O-O-G, but he is a very important figure in 20th century popular and jazz music. And he was is a graduate of Queens College. He went to the undergraduate school of Queens College in the 1950s. He graduated with a degree in physics. And then he went to Columbia to study engineering. And then he went to Cornell where he got his doctorate. And to pay for college, he was a musician. He could play the violin a little bit. And he actually took a class with my professor, Professor Berkowitz, in the 50s, right? I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old. Anyway, he's important in the evolution of the electronic synthesizer. And this was one of the first ones. This is the first one that he made commercially available. And this is called the System 55, right? And this is comprised of all sorts of things, but the sound shaping and sound creating tools like oscillators, filters, envelope generators, and a bunch of other things. But what it had right here is a sequencer, a step sequencer. So if you notice, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 columns, and each one of these is a step. So it will play like basically a measure of eighth notes and then repeat. And then you can change the pitch, the duration, and tempo. And you can also, as it's playing back, you can change it and alter those things in real time, right? And so that's still in use today. So I'm going to play you something that I did here with one of my synthesizers. This is called the Moog Matriarch. And let me just, let's see, hold on. Okay. And over here, in this area of this thing, I'm going to give you a basic overview of what this stuff is in software later on in the semester. But basically, over here is where you've got your arpeggiator and sequencer. So you can have a step sequencer or an arpeggiator, and you can affect it in all different ways. This is where you would modulate the sound. These are sort of like your utilities and attenuator. These are your oscillators. This is your mixer. This is your filter. And then these are your envelope generators. And this is a stereo an analog bucket brigade delay. And so I've got this set up on an arpeggiator to do random. And I've got it set up for, I believe, 1 octave. I might switch it during I can play these controls. And so what you'll see me playing a series of notes or chords, and then the notes will randomly play out back and forth, right? And that's kind of a sequence on a more sort of a raw level. You know, what we're going to be doing is much more advanced in some ways than this. But this is what I'm doing now. This is live performance. You know, I would go out and do a concert like this of ambient music. It would be fun. So let's listen, and then I'll play back and I'll talk about what I'm doing. Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute, right? So just basically, the arpeggiator is running, and right here, you can't read this, but this says hold, right? So when this is lit, that means if I let my hands off the keyboard, it'll still keep playing until the same pitches as the basic note collection until I play some other keys. And this is the play, right? And then this is the tap tempo, which I didn't use on this. So you'll notice that as I'm going to play it again, and you notice over here, there are lights that flash on and off, little red lights. And the tempo, you'll notice that this is at one tempo, and then this is half the speed, right? So just look at that. See how this is twice as fast? So that's the tempo. And then this is modulation. So that's what modulation is, when I'm using a parameter to affect another function of the instrument. So in other words, if I wanted to use, like, let's say something called a sine wave to affect the pitch of one of the oscillators, that's called modulation. So a sine wave is like let's see, right there. It's this kind of a thing, right? So then the pitch would go wow, 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 right? So I could use a sine wave to modulate the pitch of an oscillator. So that's called modulation. So I've got, and this wheel right here affects the level of the modulation. Now these cables are called they're patch cables, and I'm sending control voltage to different areas to change the sound. So that's a little complicated to explain right now. But what I'm going to do is this blue area here. Notice everything is color coordinated too, which is kind of nice for teaching with this. So this is the pitch of, these are oscillators. So these are 4 tone generating pieces of electronic kit, right? They're circuits. It's not, there's nothing, this is analog. There's like transistors. There is a computer chips in here, but the sound is made by analog means, not digital means. You'll notice that the oscillators, they're numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then they're columns. This is the octave. So 8 is the normal, just the regular middle C kind of thing. And then you can make it an octave lower, an octave higher, or 2 octaves higher. And then right here is the frequency. So you can change the pitch of the oscillator up and down. This bass one has that's done by the master tune, which on this instrument is, where's the master tune? I can't forget. I don't have it right here, and I can't read all these things as well as, because it's a little, oh, the master tune is right, this thing right here, this little knob right here. So you would tune up the oscillator one and then detuning the oscillators a little bit by a couple of cents here and there. It makes the sound fatter and fuller, but we'll go over that when we work with audio. And then these are your waveforms. So this synthesizer has 4 different waveforms. One that's shaped like a triangle, one that's shaped like a sawtooth, and then these are 2 different kinds of square/pulse waves. I'll be going over that. Now over here, this black area, this is the mixer. So this takes the level of each one of these oscillators. So this one is for oscillator 1, oscillator 2, oscillator 3, and oscillator 4. So you could actually have that arpeggiator going and turn off the volume on 2 of the oscillators, and it steps through the oscillators. So you might, instead of it going pika-taka, if you turn off oscillators 2 and 3, you get something that goes beep, 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 but beep, but beep, and then you could play around like you're on a mixing console with those levels to change the rhythmic feel. This right here, this green area here, this is the filter. And this filter has the cutoff frequency, and I will teach you this later in the semester. It basically is takes the high frequencies and attenuates them the further to the left it is. And it has 2 resonance controls. And what resonance does is it takes this frequency, the cutoff frequency, which right here is about 300 hertz, and it emphasizes that cutoff frequency so that let me do this with Pro Tools so I could show you that. So if I've got this set up as a low pass filter, right? When I change this, you'll see that it moves to the left. You won't hear a lot of sound up here. This is the cutoff frequency, and then this got slope. So if I move this to the left, you'll see that this gets a little bit elongated. And if I move it to the right, you see it gets very sharp. And let me play the piano part. And let me put that on loop. Yeah, it's on loop. Okay, so let me mute piano 1. Piano 2. So let me do this. Let me make this all the way up here. And then I'm going to move the cutoff frequency, and you'll listen to the sound. Very bright. Getting darker. Right? So what resonance does, and I can't do it with this particular kit here, is it takes this frequency here and it gives it more amplitude, more volume, so that the shape would look something like that when you turn the resonance up, and it adds really interesting harmonics and all sorts of really cool effects with that. So that's a low pass filter. And again, I'm going to be going over this stuff in much more detail in the future, but I'm just giving you a taste of this now. And then this is the envelope generator. So this is something that Bob Moog invented, the envelope generator, and it's in every synthesizer now. And basically, an envelope generator is volume and time. And the basic envelope generator is broken down into 4 values. The amount of time it takes, let's say you're playing a keyboard, from when you press the note down until you achieve full volume of that note. That is called the attack, right? So it's like a drum has a very sharp envelope, but with a violin, you could play the note and you could make it bloom so that the full volume happens 3 or 4 seconds after you've played the note, right? So it's the attack is the amount of time that it takes to get from no volume to full volume. The decay is the second part of the envelope. That's the amount of time it takes to get from full volume to the sustained level. So in other words, you go ba, from the full volume to the volume that I sustained at, that would be the decay level. Sustain, that would be the decay time. Sustain is level. How loud does the note hold out for once you've gotten the decay finished? So you've got the attack, which is the start of the note to full volume, the decay, which is full volume to sustained volume. And both of those are time-based. How long does it take? Sustain is actually a level, what the volume of the note being held out is. So typically you could have an envelope that looks like this. So this is the attack, this is the decay, and then this is the sustain. Attack, decay, sustain. There's all different shapes. I just gave you one basic shape of the envelope. And finally, the fourth part of the envelope is the release time. That's how long it takes from when you let go of the note or you stop playing the note for the note to reach no volume at all. So that's an envelope. And we're going to go over this more and more in the future. This is part of audio. So we spent a lot of time today on Midi, and now we're spending a little bit of time on audio. And I'm introducing you guys to some electronic music too, because I don't know if that's something that you would get on your own. We don't have really any setup at the college yet. Maybe in a few years we will. So now, as I'm playing on this video, right, you could see that I'm improvising stuff in the key of D, those of you that know keyboards, but I'm also working some of these controls as the piece is unfolding. So right now I'm playing around with the volume of the oscillators. Now I'm touching the filter. See, now it's darker sounding. And now this is the one thing I didn't talk about, right? So this pink area here, that is an echo unit, a delay unit, and it's stereo and it's analog. It's called a bucket brigade circuit, and we just had a big class on delay in digital recording and comp 2, and we're going to be talking about different delay types in our next class. And I'm going to be asking you to install some more software from Pro Tools that I'll have it all the ones I want in a folder for you guys to do. So you're only installing the ones that work. But Bucket Brigade is a particular type of delay, and it's made with analog chips. And it was putting guitar pedals in the 70s and 80s, used constantly. I have one at home. I don't have it here. But you have digital simulations of it, and we'll go over that. So what's happening with the delay is that the delay creates, anybody that took digital recording and comp, can you comment on how you think that I'm using the delay in this piece? Let me play a little bit more. It's a combination of two of the techniques we looked at in Tuesday's class. Right? It's a combination of what the Edge did, and it's a combination of what Brian May did. So what the Edge does with U2 is he plays simple things, and he lets the delay repeat those things over and over again, so that's like there's two people playing. And what Brian May of Queen did is he would play a line, and you'd have the delay set so that it would repeat that line like a couple of beats later. And he would create polyphony / counterpoint / canonic work from a single melodic line. So that's kind of what's going on, the way I'm using the delay here, so that when I change chords, like I've got it set up with it so that it's set up at like a dotted eighth note tempo, so that things are in sync, but they're a little bit off sync, and every couple of bars they hook back up to a beat, and it creates a lot of motion and a lot of energy and stuff. So and I don't play around much with the envelope generator. I just leave it set on this particular piece. Okay, so that's that. All right. So what I think we're going to do is we are going to call it a day at this point. Everybody understands. You pick your piece, and you're going to just get the notes, the piano notes in, right hand on, or the violin one on one track, violin two on the other track, piano right hand on one track, piano left hand on the other track. I was pretty specific about, pick something that works at your level. I realize that there's some people that don't have good keyboard skills. So I tried to find a piece of music that is not that difficult to get in, because the most important thing is for you to learn the techniques that I'm going to teach you. Not that you can dazzle me that you can play 5 million notes on the keyboard, right? It's to learn the techniques. I will tell you this, that some of the most successful composers that use sequencing are Hollywood composers, and most of them don't play keyboards very well. Hans Zimmer's a horrible keyboard player. Horrible. But he's incredibly successful as a composer because he knows how to do all this stuff like an expert, like a boss, So, yeah. All right. There we have it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Some of you I will see Tuesday, and the rest of you I will see next Thursday. We will continue on with this. Remember, session folder, session folder, session folder. Not session file. Thank you, Georgie. All right. I'll catch you guys next week. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very
Have a
much,
good weekend.
Professor.
Thank you.